She thought she was invisible, just a music teacher in a room full of millionaires. Then the most dangerous man in Miami walked across that ballroom floor and said 4 words that changed everything. "You're leaving with me." Lena Hayes didn't know his name yet, didn't know about the empire built on blood, the enemies circling like sharks, or the father who'd made her a target. She only knew one thing. When Dominic Varela looked at her, the whole world disappeared. And by the time she understood what that meant, it was already too late to run. If you want to see how far this story of power, obsession, and impossible choices can go, stay until the end and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far Lena and Dominic's story reaches across the world. The chandelier above the Fontainebleau ballroom scattered light like broken diamonds across 200 of Miami's wealthiest elite, and Lena Hayes had never felt more out of place in her life. She stood near the edge of the crowd, champagne glass untouched in her hand, watching women in gowns that cost more than her annual salary glide across marble floors. Their laughter was practiced, musical, the kind that came easy when you'd never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. Lena smoothed down the simple black dress she'd borrowed from her roommate, trying not to think about how the fabric pulled slightly too tight across her shoulders, or how her shoes, her only pair of heels, pinched her toes with every step. She wasn't supposed to be here. This wasn't her world, but the Harmony Heights Community Center was hemorrhaging money, and if she didn't secure funding tonight, 43 kids would lose the only music program in their neighborhood, the only thing standing between some of them and the streets. So she'd put on the dress, practiced her pitch in the mirror until her throat was raw, and walked into this glittering fortress of wealth with her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 hours later, she'd collected exactly 4 business cards and a lot of polite dismissals. "We'll be in touch. Send us your proposal. Such important work you're doing." Translation: don't hold your breath. Lena set down her champagne, untouched, and calculated how long she had to stay before leaving wouldn't seem rude. The auction had ended. The speeches were over. Most of the serious donors had already migrated toward the private lounges where the real money changed hands, rooms she'd never be invited into. She was about to slip toward the exit when the air in the ballroom changed. It was subtle at first, a shift in the current of conversation, like everyone had taken the same breath at the same moment. Lena felt it before she understood it, a prickling awareness that lifted the hair on the back of her neck. Then she saw him. He stood near the entrance, surrounded by men in dark suits who looked less like guests and more like wolves in expensive clothing. But it wasn't them that made every conversation stutter and die. It wasn't them that pulled every eye in the room like gravity. It was the man in the center, tall, broad-shouldered. His suit was midnight black, perfectly tailored to a frame that suggested violence barely contained beneath silk and wool. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all hard angles and brutal elegance. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Cold, calculating. The kind of eyes that saw everything and forgave nothing. He moved through the crowd like a king through his court, and the sea of Miami's elite parted without him saying a word. Men who owned skyscrapers stepped aside. Women who'd married into oil fortunes averted their gazes. A city councilman Lena had seen on the news that morning practically tripped over himself getting out of the way. She didn't know his name, but she knew what he was. Power. Pure, undiluted, and absolutely terrifying. "That's Dominic Varela," a voice murmured beside her. Lena turned to find an older woman in emerald silk watching the man with the kind of fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. Her face was tight with poorly concealed fear. "Who?" Lena asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "The Varela family." The woman's voice dropped even lower. "Shipping, real estate, import-export." Each word carried weight, implication. "They've owned half of Miami for 3 generations. The other half is too smart to ask questions." Translation: Mafia. Lena's stomach dropped. She should look away, should disappear into the crowd before those cold eyes found her. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because Dominic Varela had stopped walking, and he was looking directly at her. The distance between them could have been 5 feet or 5 miles. Lena couldn't tell anymore. Sound faded to white noise. The crowd blurred at the edges. There was only him, and the way his gaze locked onto hers with the precision of a predator selecting prey. He didn't smile, didn't nod. He just looked at her like he'd found something he'd been searching for, and the recognition in his eyes made her blood run cold. Then he started walking toward her. Every instinct Lena possessed screamed at her to run. Her hand tightened around her clutch purse. Her muscles tensed, but her feet wouldn't move. Rooted to the marble floor, as Dominic Varela crossed the ballroom with the kind of purpose that suggested nothing, not walls, not crowds, not the laws of physics themselves, would stop him from reaching his destination. The people around her melted away. She was alone when he stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Up close, he was even more devastating and even more dangerous. A faint scar cut through his left eyebrow. His cologne was subtle, expensive, with an undertone of something darker. Smoke and cedar and barely leashed violence. "You don't belong here," he said. His voice was low, rough-edged, with the faintest trace of an accent she couldn't place. Not a question. A statement of fact delivered with absolute certainty. Lena's throat was dry. "Excuse me?" "This world." He gestured vaguely at the ballroom, the champagne, the glittering excess surrounding them. "These people. You're not one of them." She should have been offended, should have bristled at the presumption, the arrogance. Instead, she felt seen in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. "I'm here for the charity," she managed. "I run a music program. We need—" "I know why you're here, Lena." Her name in his mouth stopped her cold. "How do you—" "You've been pitching donors all night." His eyes never left hers. Harmony Heights Community Center. 43 students. A waiting list of 62 more. Your program is the only thing keeping some of those kids out of the pipeline. The pipeline. The casual brutality of the term, the acknowledgement of exactly what pipeline he meant, sent ice down her spine. "You've been watching me," she whispered. "I've been watching you since you walked through those doors 3 hours ago." No apology, no shame, just fact. "You're the only real thing in this room." His hand lifted and Lena's breath caught as he reached toward her face. She should step back, should slap his hand away, should scream for security. She didn't move. His fingers brushed her cheek so gentle it was almost reverent, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The touch lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it burned like a brand. "Dance with me," he said. Not a question. A command delivered in a tone that suggested he wasn't accustomed to hearing the word no. "I don't think—" "One dance, Lena." Her name again, like he'd been saying it for years, like it belonged to him. "Then I'll fund your program. Every dollar you need. No strings." Her heart stuttered. "What?" "One dance," he repeated, his hand extended between them, palm up, waiting. "That's all I'm asking." Lena stared at his hand like it was a loaded gun. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? A weapon. An offer designed to look like salvation but wrapped in threat. She didn't know this man. Didn't know what he wanted, what he did, what empire of blood and darkness he ruled from the shadows. But she knew those 43 kids. Knew Marcus, who'd stopped carrying a knife to school after he discovered the saxophone. Knew Destiny, whose voice could shatter glass and had kept her off the corner where her sister worked. Knew all of them, every face, every story, every fragile dream that would die if she walked away from this moment. "Just a dance?" she asked. Something flickered in his eyes. Not quite a smile, but close. "Just a dance." Lena took his hand. The world didn't end. Lightning didn't strike. But the moment her palm touched his, something fundamental shifted in the axis of her universe. His fingers closed around hers, warm, strong, absolutely certain, and he led her onto the dance floor. The orchestra was playing something slow and classical. Lena barely heard it over the thunder of her own heartbeat as Dominic's hand settled at the small of her back, pulling her closer than propriety allowed. She could feel the heat of him through her dress, the solid strength of muscle and bone. "You're shaking," he murmured. "I'm not afraid of you." "I know." His thumb traced a slow circle against her spine. "That's what makes you dangerous." They moved together, swaying to music Lena couldn't quite hear anymore. She was hyper-aware of everything, the pressure of his hand, the way he guided her effortlessly through the steps, the fact that every person in the ballroom was watching them with expressions ranging from shock to horror to poorly concealed envy. "Why me?" she asked quietly. Why not you? That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. His eyes held hers, and Lena saw something in their depths that made her breath catch. Hunger. Not the simple kind. Not just desire, though that was there too, banked and burning. This was something deeper, more primal. The look of a man who'd spent his whole life taking what he wanted and had just found something he couldn't buy, couldn't threaten, couldn't own. Something he wanted anyway. What do you want from me? Lena whispered. The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them could voice in a room full of witnesses. Dominic's hand tightened fractionally against her back. Everything, he said simply. Before Lena could process that, before she could decide if it was a promise or a threat, he spun her out and pulled her back in, closer than before. Close enough that her chest pressed against his, close enough that she could feel his heart beating steady and sure beneath his ribs. You're insane, she breathed. Probably. His lips were close to her ear now, his voice dropping to something private, intimate, meant only for her. But you're still here. He was right. She should have pulled away, should have thanked him politely and walked straight out those doors. Instead, she let him hold her, let him move her across the floor like she belonged to him. The song ended. The orchestra transitioned seamlessly into something new, but Dominic stopped moving. His hand remained at her back, keeping her anchored against him even as couples swirled around them. Come with me, he said. Lena's throat tightened. Where? Does it matter? Yes. For the first time since he'd approached her, something like amusement flickered across his face. Honest, I like that. His hand lifted to her face again, fingers tracing the line of her jaw with devastating gentleness. I want to talk. Somewhere private. Just talk, Lena. Nothing you don't want. Every cell in her body screamed that this was a mistake, that private conversations with men like Dominic Varela led to consequences that couldn't be undone, that she was standing on the edge of a cliff she couldn't see the bottom of. But he'd said her name 3 times now, each one sounding more like a prayer, and she was so tired of being invisible. Okay, she heard herself say. Just talk. The smile he gave her should have been illegal. It transformed his entire face, softening the brutal angles into something almost beautiful, almost human. He laced his fingers through hers and led her off the dance floor. They moved through the crowd, and Lena felt the weight of 100 stares following them. The woman in emerald silk looked like she was watching a lamb walk into a slaughterhouse. A silver-haired man in a tuxedo crossed himself as they passed. Dominic seemed oblivious to it all. Or maybe he just didn't care. They left the ballroom through a side door that led into a quiet corridor lined with marble columns and expensive artwork. Dominic's security detail materialized from nowhere, falling into formation around them. 3 men in dark suits with cold eyes, and the kind of stillness that came from professional violence. Where are we going? Lena asked, her voice echoing in the empty hallway. Somewhere we can actually hear each other think. They took an elevator to the roof. When the doors opened, Lena stepped out into warm Miami night air and froze. A helicopter sat in the center of the rooftop helipad, rotors already spinning in a slow, lazy circle. The pilot was visible through the cockpit window, running through pre-flight checks. Lena's hand slipped from Dominic's. No, she said, taking a step back. No, you said we were going to talk. We are. Dominic turned to face her, completely calm. Just not here. Too many ears. You want me to get in a helicopter, with you, a man I met 20 minutes ago? Yes. The simplicity of it was almost funny. Almost. You're out of your mind. You're not the first person to think so. He took a step toward her, and Lena matched it with one backward. His eyes tracked the movement. I'm not going to hurt you, Lena. Forgive me if I don't find that particularly reassuring coming from... She stopped herself. From what? His voice was soft, dangerous. Say it. From someone who clearly has more security than the president. Smart deflection. Another step forward. But we both know what you were going to say. Lena's back hit the elevator door. There was nowhere left to retreat. Dominic stopped just outside her personal space, close enough to touch, but not touching, giving her room to breathe even as he cut off every exit. I could make you get on that helicopter, he said quietly. Do you know that? I could have my men pick you up and put you in that seat, and there wouldn't be a single person in this building who would stop me. Do you understand what that means? Lena's pulse hammered in her throat. You're threatening me. I'm being honest with you. His hand lifted, and this time she did flinch. He noticed, and something dark passed through his eyes before his fingers settled gently against her cheek. I could take you, but I won't, because I don't want fear, Lena. I want you to choose. This isn't a choice. This is coercion. Is it? His thumb brushed her lower lip, and heat bloomed low in her stomach despite every warning signal firing in her brain. Because you can walk back into that elevator right now, go back to the gala, get your business cards and your polite rejections, and take the bus home to your apartment in Coral Gables. I won't stop you. But you'll never know, he finished for her. His eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you'd been brave enough to say yes, wondering what I wanted to tell you, wondering what this could have been. He was right, and Lena hated him for it, because she would wonder, would lie awake replaying this moment, this choice, imagining all the roads not taken. One conversation, she said, voice shaking. Then you bring me back. One conversation. He stepped back, hand extending toward the helicopter. I promise. The promise of a criminal meant nothing. Lena knew that, but she took his hand anyway. The helicopter's interior was pure luxury. Leather seats, ambient lighting, enough space for 6 people comfortably. Dominic guided her to a seat and buckled her in himself, his hands quick and efficient. Then he sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. The pilot's voice crackled through the headset Dominic handed her. We're clear for takeoff, sir. Go, Dominic said. The helicopter lifted smoothly into the night sky, and Lena watched Miami spread out beneath them in a glittering sprawl of light and shadow. The ocean was black glass reflecting the moon. The city looked almost peaceful from up here, almost innocent. It was beautiful, and she was in a helicopter with a man whose name people whispered like a curse. Where are we going? She asked through the headset. Dominic didn't answer. They flew south, away from the city lights, out over the dark expanse of ocean. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the rhythmic thump of rotor blades. Lena's hands twisted together in her lap. Her borrowed dress felt too tight, her heels too high, her whole body too small for the magnitude of the mistake she was making. Then she saw it, an island rising from the black water like something from a dream or a nightmare. Trees crowned its center, surrounding a sprawling estate that glowed against the darkness, white stone and glass and architectural impossibility. A private dock stretched into the water. Security lights marked a perimeter that suggested this wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. The helicopter descended toward a landing pad near the main house, and Lena's heart dropped into her stomach. What is this? She breathed. Home, Dominic said simply. They touched down. The rotors began to slow. Dominic unbuckled her seatbelt and then his own, but when Lena reached for the door handle, his hand covered hers. Wait, he said. For what? For me to tell you the truth. Lena's blood went cold. What truth? Dominic's expression was unreadable in the dim light of the cabin. Your father is Richard Hayes, federal prosecutor for the Southern District of Florida. For the past 18 months, he's been building a RICO case against my family's organization. 3 weeks ago, he filed for indictments. 6 of my people are in federal custody. 2 more are in witness protection. His hand tightened over hers. He's trying to dismantle everything my family has built over 3 generations. The words hit her like physical blows. Her father. The case he'd been obsessed with. The late nights, the security detail, the way he'd insisted she change her last name on all her professional materials, use her mother's maiden name, Hayes instead of Shaw, for safety. Oh God. You knew, she whispered. This whole time, the ballroom, the dance, the funding. Her voice cracked. You knew who I was. Yes. And you brought me here anyway. Yes. Lena yanked her hand from his and reached for the door. It didn't budge. Locked. She tried the other side. Same result. Panic clawed up her throat as she spun to face Dominic, who watched her with that same unreadable expression. Let me out, she said. Lena, let me out right now or I swear to God. Your leverage. He cut her off, voice hard. Your father has something I need. Now I have something he needs. That's how this works. The helicopter cabin suddenly felt too small, too airless. Lena's chest heaved as she fought against the seatbelt she'd forgotten was still fastened. You're going to trade me, like property. I'm going to keep you safe while negotiations happen. Dominic's hand settled on her shoulder, firm but not painful. You won't be hurt. You'll have everything you need, but you're not leaving this island until your father and I reach an understanding. This is kidnapping! Yes, he agreed, infuriatingly calm. It is. I trusted you. I know. Something flickered in his eyes, regret, maybe, or the ghost of it. I'm sorry for that. The apology made it worse somehow, made it real. Lena stopped fighting and slumped back in her seat, the full weight of her stupidity crashing down on her. She'd gotten into a helicopter with a stranger, had let him take her to a private island, had believed his promises, his gentle touches, the way he'd said her name like it mattered. My father won't negotiate with you, she said quietly. He doesn't do that, even for me. Then I guess we'll both find out how much you're worth to him. Dominic opened his door and stepped out into the night. A moment later, her door opened, and he was there, hand extended like he'd done in the ballroom a lifetime ago. Lena stared at his hand with hatred burning in her chest. Then she took it, because the alternative was being carried, and she'd be damned if she gave him that satisfaction. Her heels clicked against the concrete landing pad. The warm ocean breeze caught her dress, and she shivered despite the temperature. Dominic's security detail materialized again. 4 men this time, armed and professional, forming a loose perimeter around them as they walked toward the house. The estate was even more impressive up close. Modern architecture blended seamlessly with natural elements, stone and wood, and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the moonlight. They entered through a side door into a foyer that could have housed her entire apartment. This way, Dominic said, guiding her up a curved staircase. He led her down a long hallway to a bedroom that was bigger than any space she'd ever lived in. King bed with silk sheets, private balcony overlooking the ocean, bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people, a gilded cage. You'll stay here, Dominic said. Clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom. Kitchen is downstairs. Help yourself to anything. The house is secure, so don't bother trying to leave. Lena turned to face him, arms crossed over her chest. How long? As long as it takes. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Lena, I meant what I said in the ballroom. You are the only real thing I've seen in a very long time. Go to hell, she said. He smiled then, a real smile, small and sad. I've been there, sweetheart. It's not so different from here. The door closed behind him. Lena heard the lock click into place. She was alone, and she was trapped. Bon? Lena didn't sleep that first night. She paced the perimeter of her gilded prison until her feet ached, testing every window, every door, every possible exit, all locked, all reinforced with security glass that wouldn't break no matter how hard she tried. The balcony overlooked a 30-foot drop onto rocks and dark water. Suicide, not escape. By the time dawn broke over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, she'd accepted the reality of her situation. She was trapped on an island owned by a man who'd orchestrated her kidnapping with the same careful precision he probably applied to every criminal enterprise he ran. A man who'd looked at her across a ballroom and decided she was useful. Nothing more. The anger that realization sparked was almost a relief. It burned away the confusion, the hurt, the small traitorous part of her that had believed, for one stupid moment, that Dominic Varela had wanted her for reasons that had nothing to do with her father. She was leverage, a bargaining chip, a pawn in a game between powerful men who wouldn't lose sleep over what happened to her once she'd served her purpose. Fine. She could work with that. Lena showered in the massive bathroom, scrubbing away the previous night's makeup and the lingering ghost of Dominic's touch. The closet was stocked with clothes in exactly her size, designer labels she'd only seen in magazines, still bearing tags with price points that made her stomach turn. She chose the simplest outfit she could find, white linen pants and a loose cotton shirt. No jewelry, no heels, nothing that would make her feel like a doll being dressed up for someone else's amusement. Her reflection in the mirror looked pale, dark circles under her eyes, but determined. She braided her hair back from her face in a tight plait and opened the bedroom door. It wasn't locked anymore. The hallway outside was empty, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked manicured gardens and the ocean beyond. Lena followed the scent of coffee downstairs, her bare feet silent against cool marble. The kitchen was a chef's dream, all stainless steel and granite countertops, a breakfast bar that could seat 8, and windows that opened onto a terrace overlooking an infinity pool. A woman in her 50s stood at the stove, humming quietly to herself as she flipped what looked like French toast. She turned when Lena entered, and her weathered face creased into a warm smile. "Good morning," she said in accented English, her voice carrying the musical lilt of the Caribbean. "You must be Miss Hayes." "I'm Rosa. I manage the house." Lena stopped in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. "You work for him?" "I work for the Varela family, yes." Rosa gestured to the breakfast bar. "Sit, please. You must be hungry." "I'm not." "You will be." Rosa set a plate down anyway, French toast dusted with powdered sugar, fresh berries, a side of crispy bacon. "I've been making breakfast in this house for 15 years. I know when someone needs to eat." The food smelled incredible, and Lena's stomach betrayed her with a low growl. She hadn't eaten since lunch yesterday, too nervous about the gala to keep anything down. Rosa poured coffee into a thick ceramic mug and slid it across the counter. "Cream and sugar on the bar," she said. "Or I can make you tea if you prefer." Lena sat slowly, eyeing the food like it might be poisoned. "Does he know you're feeding me?" "Mr. Varela told me to make sure you have everything you need." Rosa returned to the stove, cracking eggs into a pan with practiced efficiency. "That includes food, Miss Hayes." "It's just Lena." "Lena, then." Rosa glanced over her shoulder, her expression softening. "I know you're frightened, but no one here will hurt you. You have my word." "Forgive me if the word of someone who works for a kidnapper doesn't mean much." Rosa's hand stilled on the spatula. Then she turned, wiping her hands on her apron, and fixed Lena with a look that was equal parts stern and compassionate. "I raised 3 daughters," she said quietly, "all grown now, with families of their own. If one of them were in your position, I would pray someone was there to make sure she was fed, clothed, and treated with dignity." She paused. "That's what I'm doing for you. Not because Mr. Varela ordered it, but because it's the right thing to do." Lena's throat tightened. She picked up her fork and took a bite of French toast. It was perfect, crispy on the outside, soft in the middle, with just a hint of vanilla and cinnamon. She hated that it tasted so good. "Thank you," she said finally. Rosa nodded and returned to the stove, giving Lena space to eat in peace. The coffee was strong and dark, exactly how she liked it. The bacon was thick-cut and smoky. Every bite felt like a small betrayal, her body accepting comfort from the same people who'd stripped away her freedom. She was halfway through the meal when Dominic appeared in the doorway. Lena's hand froze mid-bite. He looked different in daylight, less like a predator in a ballroom and more like a man who'd actually slept, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. He'd traded the tuxedo for dark jeans and a white linen shirt rolled up to his forearms, revealing tanned skin and what looked like a tattoo curling around his left wrist, some kind of symbol Lena couldn't quite make out. "Good morning," he said. Lena set down her fork very deliberately. "Is it?" Rosa cleared her throat. "I'll just—" She grabbed a dish towel and disappeared through a side door, leaving them alone. Dominic crossed to the coffee pot and poured himself a cup. He moved with the same controlled grace she remembered from the ballroom, every gesture economical and precise. When he turned to face her, his expression was unreadable. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Did you care?" "Yes." The simplicity of the answer caught her off guard. "I know you don't believe that, but it's true." Lena laughed, the sound bitter. "You kidnapped me, locked me in a room, used me as bait to manipulate my father. But sure, you care if I got a good night's sleep. I never locked you in." Dominic took a sip of coffee, watching her over the rim of his mug. "The door was open all night." "The house isn't." "No," he agreed. "It's not." "So what's the difference?" "Choice." He set down his mug and moved closer, stopping on the opposite side of the breakfast bar. "You can move freely anywhere on this property. Kitchen, library, pool, gardens. You're not a prisoner in a cell, Lena. You're a guest who can't leave." That's the same thing. Is it? His eyes held hers. Because from where I'm standing, there's a world of difference between the two. Lena pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. You're insane if you think semantics make this okay. I never said it was okay. Dominic's voice dropped lower. I said it was necessary. For you. For both of us. Don't. Lena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against tile. Don't pretend you did this for my benefit. You took me because I'm useful. Because my father won't negotiate unless you have something he wants. That's it. Don't dress it up as anything else. Dominic's jaw tightened. You're right. That's why I took you. He paused. But that's not why you're still here. What's that supposed to mean? It means I could have sent you back this morning with a list of demands. Could have made my point and returned you to your life. His eyes darkened. But I didn't. The implication hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Lena's pulse kicked up despite her anger. Why not? Because you asked me a question last night, in the ballroom. Dominic moved around the breakfast bar, closing the distance between them with slow, deliberate steps. You asked what I wanted from you. Lena's back hit the counter. You said everything. I meant it. He stopped just outside her personal space, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I've spent my entire life taking what I want, Lena. Building empires, eliminating threats, controlling everything and everyone in my sphere of influence. His hand lifted and she flinched before his fingers settled gently against her cheek. But you're the first thing I've wanted that I can't just take. You already took me, she whispered. I'm here. Your body is here, not your choice. His thumb traced the curve of her jaw. I want you to choose me, Lena, not because you're afraid, not because I'm forcing you. I want you to look at me and decide that whatever this is between us is worth exploring. There's nothing between us. You made sure of that when you kidnapped me. Did I? His voice was barely above a murmur now, intimate and dark. Because the way you're looking at me right now suggests otherwise. Lena's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, that the heat pooling low in her stomach was anger and nothing else. But his eyes saw too much, read her too clearly. I hate you, she said instead. I know. His hand dropped from her face. But you don't fear me. That's what makes you dangerous. He stepped back, giving her space to breathe, and Lena's legs nearly buckled from the sudden absence of his presence. She gripped the counter behind her for support. Your father called this morning, Dominic said, his tone shifting back to business like they hadn't just been standing close enough to kiss. Threatened federal charges, international warrants, a task force, the usual. Lena's stomach dropped. What did you tell him? That you're safe, fed, unharmed. Dominic picked up his coffee mug. That he has 48 hours to drop the RICO case and release my people, or this becomes a very different conversation. He won't do it. He will. Eventually. Dominic's certainty was absolute, because no matter how much he wants to see my family brought down, he wants his daughter back more. You don't know him. I know men like him. Dominic's expression hardened. Righteous. Uncompromising. Convinced they're on the side of justice. But everyone breaks when the stakes are high enough, even federal prosecutors. Lena shook her head. My father's career is everything to him. He won't throw it away. Then I guess we'll find out what matters more. Dominic set his mug in the sink. In the meantime, you're welcome to explore the island. There are guards posted around the perimeter, for your protection, as much as to keep you here. Protection from what? His expression shuddered. From people who would love to know I'm holding Richard Hayes' daughter. People who wouldn't be as careful with you as I am. The implication sent ice down her spine. You mean your enemies? I mean everyone. Dominic moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Rosa will show you the library. There's a phone in there. Landline. Works perfectly. You're free to call whoever you want. Lena blinked. What? Call your father, your friends, anyone. He met her eyes. I'm not interested in isolation tactics, Lena. You want to talk to the outside world? Go ahead. Just know that every call is monitored, and anything that sounds like an escape plan will be shut down immediately. You're giving me a phone. I'm giving you a choice. He stepped into the hallway. Use it or don't. It's up to you. Then he was gone, leaving Lana standing alone in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and cinnamon, her mind reeling. Rosa reappeared a few minutes later, tactfully pretending she hadn't been listening from the next room. Would you like to see the rest of the house? Lena nodded mutely. The estate was enormous. 8 bedrooms, a home gym, a theater room, and a library that made her breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with books in a dozen languages. Leather armchairs positioned near windows overlooking the ocean. And there, on an antique desk in the corner, sat a cream-colored telephone that looked like it had been waiting for her. I'll leave you to explore, Rosa said gently. If you need anything, just call. The intercom system connects to the kitchen. Lena waited until she was alone, then crossed to the phone and picked up the receiver. The dial tone hummed in her ear, steady and real. She dialed her father's private number from memory. He answered on the first ring. Lena. His voice cracked on her name. Are you hurt? Did he... I'm fine, Dad. She sank into one of the leather chairs, suddenly exhausted. I'm not hurt. I'm going to get you out of there. Richard Hayes' voice shook with barely controlled fury. I've already contacted the FBI. They're assembling a tactical team. No! The word came out sharper than she intended. Dad, listen to me. If you send federal agents to this island, people will die. Do you understand? This place is a fortress. I don't care about his security. I care about you. Then don't do something that will get me killed in the crossfire. Lena closed her eyes. He said you have 48 hours. Is that true? Silence on the other end. Then, I can't drop this case, Lena. Do you understand what's at stake? The Varela organization is responsible for trafficking, extortion, money laundering. I know what they do. Then you know I can't negotiate with terrorists. I'm not asking you to negotiate. I'm asking you not to start a war you can't win. Her voice softened. Please, Dad, just give me time to figure this out. Time for what? Good question. Lena stared out the window at the endless stretch of ocean. I don't know yet, but storming this place with tactical teams isn't the answer. He's gotten to you already. Her father's voice turned cold. This is what they do, Lena. They make you think they're reasonable, that there's some kind of middle ground. There isn't. Dominic Varela is a monster, and the longer you're there... I have to go, Lena interrupted. I'll call again soon. Lena, wait. She hung up. Her hands were shaking. She set the phone down carefully and pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. Her father was right. She knew he was right. Dominic Varela was a criminal, a kidnapper, probably a killer. Everything he touched was stained with blood and corruption. So why did part of her, a small traitorous part she couldn't silence, want to believe he was telling the truth when he said he wouldn't hurt her? Lena spent the rest of the day exploring the island, mapping every path and trail with the grim determination of someone planning an escape. The property was massive, maybe 20 acres of carefully landscaped gardens, natural forest, and rocky shoreline. Guards were posted at regular intervals, professional and armed, watching her with the detached interest of men doing a job. She found the dock where the helicopter had landed, found a boathouse with 3 vessels inside, all locked and alarmed, found exactly 0 ways off this island that didn't involve swimming through shark-infested waters or overpowering trained security. By sunset, she was exhausted and no closer to freedom than she'd been that morning. Rosa had left dinner in the kitchen, grilled fish, roasted vegetables, rice seasoned with herbs Lena couldn't identify. She ate alone at the breakfast bar, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to black through the windows. She was rinsing her plate when Dominic appeared in the doorway. You've been walking all day, he observed. Lena didn't turn around. Exploring my cage. Find anything interesting? 3 security cameras per acre, armed guards every 100 feet, boats that require biometric access. She set the plate in the dish rack. You're very thorough. I have to be. He moved into the kitchen, maintaining distance between them. Did you call your father? You already know I did. You said every call is monitored. I know you placed the call. I don't know what you said. Lena turned to face him, leaning against the counter. I told him not to send federal agents to rescue me, that it would end badly for everyone. Something flickered in Dominic's eyes. You protected me. I protected myself. A raid means gunfire. Gunfire means people die. I'd rather not be one of them. Smart. He pulled out one of the bar stools and sat, the movement casual. Your father didn't take it well. Would you? If someone took your daughter? I don't have children. Hypothetically. Dominic considered this. If someone took someone I cared about, I would burn the world down to get them back. Laws, consequences, collateral damage, none of it would matter. His eyes met hers. So no, I don't blame your father for wanting to tear me apart. Just for the record, Lena said quietly, I don't care about you. Not even a little. So if you're waiting for some kind of Stockholm syndrome to kick in, you're going to be disappointed. Noted? His lips quirked. But you're still talking to me. Because I'm bored and angry, and you're the only person on this island who isn't being paid to be nice to me. Rosa likes you. Rosa pities me. There's a difference. Dominic stood and crossed to the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the dark ocean. For a long moment he was silent. Then, I was 12 when I killed my first man. Lena's breath caught. His name was Victor Cruz. He worked for my father, enforcer, collector, the kind of man who enjoyed his job a little too much. Dominic's voice was flat, emotionless. He came to our house one night, drunk, angry about some perceived slight. My father wasn't home. My mother was. Lena didn't want to hear this. Didn't want to know what had shaped this man into someone who could orchestrate kidnappings with the same ease most people ordered coffee. But she couldn't look away. Victor broke down the door, started hitting her. I was upstairs, heard everything. Dominic's hand pressed against the glass. I grabbed my father's gun from his office, went downstairs. Victor saw me and laughed, said I didn't have the balls to pull the trigger. Did you? 3 times. Center mass. He turned to face her, and his eyes were empty. My father came home an hour later, found me sitting on the floor next to the body, covered in blood. He didn't ask if I was okay, didn't comfort me. He just looked at me and said, "Good, now you understand what this life requires." Lena's throat was tight. Why are you telling me this? Because you called me a monster earlier. You're not wrong. Dominic moved away from the window. I've done things that would keep you awake at night, hurt people, destroyed lives, built an empire on blood and fear. That's who I am, Lena. That's what I come from. Then let me go. The words came out as a plea. If you're trying to be better, start here. Let me go home. I can't. You mean you won't? Same thing. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the scar through his eyebrow, the faint lines around his eyes. 46 hours left. If your father doesn't drop the case, I'll have to make the stakes higher. Hurt someone he cares about. Destroy something that matters to him. And I will do it, Lena, because that's what this world requires. You don't have to. She searched his face for any sign of the man who danced with her in the ballroom. You could choose differently. Could I? His hand lifted, fingers settling against her neck, thumb resting over her pulse. Because, from where I'm standing, the only choice I've made in the last 24 hours that wasn't calculated, strategic, or necessary was keeping you here longer than I needed to. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. What are you saying? I'm saying you're right. I could have sent you back this morning with my demands. Could have made my point without keeping you here. His thumb stroked her pulse point. But I wanted more time. Wanted to see if the woman who looked at me in that ballroom like I was worth something more than fear was real, or just my imagination. I don't look at you like that. Liar. His voice dropped to a whisper. You're doing it right now. He was right, and Lena hated herself for it. Hated that her body betrayed her, leaning into his touch instead of pulling away. Hated that some broken part of her responded to the darkness in him, recognized it as something familiar and dangerous and magnetic. This is insane, she breathed. I know. His forehead nearly touched hers. Tell me to stop. Stop. Mean it. Lena's hands came up, intending to push him away. Instead, her fingers curled into his shirt, holding him there. I hate you. I know. His lips brushed her temple. But you don't fear me. I should. Yes. His mouth found hers, The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined. Not forceful or demanding, but slow, deliberate. Like he was memorizing the taste of her, the shape of her mouth, the small sound she made when his tongue swept against hers. Lena's grip tightened on his shirt, pulling him closer, even as her mind screamed that this was wrong, dangerous, the worst decision she could possibly make. Dominic's hands framed her face, holding her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "That was a mistake," Lena whispered. "Probably." His thumb traced her swollen lower lip. "Are you going to stop me if I do it again?" She should. Should slap him, push him away, remind herself that he was her captor, and this was just another form of control. But when he leaned in again, she met him halfway. This time the kiss was different, hungrier, less careful. Dominic's hand slid into her hair, destroying her careful braid, and Lena's arms wound around his neck. She could feel the rapid beat of his heart against her chest, could taste coffee and something darker on his tongue. When they broke apart again, his eyes were nearly black. "Go to bed, Lena," he said roughly, "while I'm still capable of letting you." "What if I don't want to?" "Then we're both in trouble." He forced himself to step back, putting space between them. 46 hours. After that, everything changes. Changes how? "I don't know yet." He moved toward the door. "But I'm starting to think your father isn't the only one with something to lose here." Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone in the kitchen with the taste of him still on her lips and the terrible knowledge that she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. She touched her mouth, feeling where he'd kissed her, and tried to remember why she was supposed to hate him. It was getting harder by the hour. Lena woke to the sound of gunfire. She bolted upright in bed, heart slamming against her ribs, the echo of shots still ringing in her ears. For one disoriented moment, she thought she'd dreamed it. Another nightmare about the ballroom, the helicopter, Dominic's hands in her hair. Then she heard shouting, men's voices, harsh and urgent, somewhere outside. More gunfire, sharp cracks that split the pre-dawn quiet like thunder. Lena threw off the silk sheets and ran to the balcony, pressing herself against the glass door as she peered into the darkness. The security lights had been cut. The island was dark except for muzzle flashes near the dock, brief bursts of orange that illuminated figures moving through the shadows. She counted at least 6, maybe more, all armed and advancing toward the house with military precision. This wasn't a rescue. Her door slammed open. Lena spun, a scream caught in her throat. But it was Dominic. He was dressed all in black, a gun in his hand, his face hard as stone in the dim light from the hallway. "Get dressed," he ordered. "Now, we have 2 minutes." "What's happening?" "Rivals. They found out you're here." He crossed to the closet and yanked it open, grabbing dark jeans and a shirt. "They're not here to rescue you, Lena. They're here to take you from me and use you themselves. So unless you want to find out what that looks like, get dressed." The cold certainty in his voice broke through her shock. Lena grabbed the clothes and changed with shaking hands, not caring that he was watching. Jeans, shirt, the sneakers Rosa had left in the closet. Her fingers fumbled with the laces. "Who are they?" she demanded. "The Kozlov organization, Russian syndicate out of Brighton Beach." Dominic checked his weapon with practiced efficiency. "They've been trying to move into my territory for months. Taking you would accomplish 2 things. Hurt me and gain leverage over your father. So this is your fault." "Yes." No denial, no excuses. "Which is why I'm getting you out of here." Another explosion of gunfire, closer this time. Lena heard glass shatter somewhere downstairs. Dominic grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the door. "Stay behind me. Don't run unless I tell you to. And if I go down—" He pressed something into her palm. A key. "Boathouse, 3rd slip. Security override is 7429. You run and you don't look back. Understood?" Lena stared at the key. "You're giving me an escape route." "I'm giving you a chance." His eyes met hers, hard and unflinching. "Take it if you have to." They moved into the hallway at a run. The house that had seemed so peaceful yesterday was now a war zone. Shouting, gunfire, the acrid smell of smoke drifting up from the lower levels. Dominic kept her close, weapon raised, moving with the kind of controlled aggression that spoke to years of training. They made it to the stairs when the first attacker appeared. He came around the corner at the bottom of the staircase, tall, broad, with a shaved head and cold eyes. He saw them and raised his weapon. Dominic fired first. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. The man went down hard, blood spreading across marble in a dark pool. Lena's ears rang, her vision tunneling, but Dominic was already moving, dragging her down the stairs and over the body like it was just another obstacle. "Don't look," he commanded. "Eyes on me." But she'd already seen. The man's eyes were still open, staring at nothing, a neat hole in his chest that shouldn't have been able to end a life so quickly. Lena's stomach heaved. "Lena!" Dominic's hand cupped her face, forcing her to focus on him. "Stay with me. You fall apart later. Right now, you run. Can you do that?" She nodded mutely. "Good girl." He released her, and they kept moving. The lower level was chaos. 2 more bodies. Dominic's security, she realized with a sick jolt, sprawled near the shattered windows. The sliding glass doors to the terrace had been blown open, and through them Lena could see more figures advancing across the lawn. Dominic pulled her toward the kitchen, but before they reached it, 3 men burst through the opposite door. Everything happened too fast. Dominic shoved Lena behind him and opened fire. She hit the ground hard, her palms skidding on broken glass. Bullets tore through the air above her head, punching holes in walls, shattering what was left of the windows. Someone screamed. She thought it might have been her. When the gunfire stopped, 2 of the attackers were down. The third had Dominic pinned against the wall, his gun knocked away, both men grappling for control. Lena saw the knife in the attacker's hand a split second before it plunged toward Dominic's chest. She didn't think, didn't plan, just grabbed a shard of broken glass and drove it into the man's neck. Blood sprayed hot across her hands, her face. The man made a horrible gurgling sound and collapsed, and suddenly Dominic was there, pulling her away, checking her for injuries with hands that shook despite their steadiness moments before. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "Lena, look at me. Are you hurt?" "I killed him." Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. I killed... You saved my life." Dominic's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Do you hear me? You saved my life. And right now we need to keep moving or we're both dead." He grabbed his weapon and they ran. The path to the boathouse cut through the gardens, now littered with shell casings and the bodies of men who'd been guarding the perimeter. Lena tried not to look, tried not to think about how many people had died in the last 5 minutes, how much blood was on her hands, literally and metaphorically. They were 50 feet from the boathouse when the explosion hit. The force threw them both forward. Lena hit the ground hard, her head cracking against something solid, stars bursting behind her eyes. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. She tasted blood. Hands grabbed her, rough, not Dominic's. Lena fought, kicking and clawing, but her head was spinning, and whoever had her was strong. They lifted her like she weighed nothing, and through the haze of pain and disorientation, she heard voices speaking rapid Russian. Then gunfire erupted again, and she was falling. She hit the grass, rolled, and came up on her knees in time to see Dominic emerge from the smoke like something out of a nightmare. His shirt was torn, blood streaking one side of his face, but his eyes were clear and absolutely murderous. He killed the first man before they could react. The second got off a shot that went wide, and Dominic closed the distance, disarming him with brutal efficiency before putting a bullet through his skull. The third man grabbed Lena, hauling her against his chest with an arm around her throat. She felt the press of cold metal against her temple. "Drop it," the man said in heavily accented English, "or I paint the grass with her brains." Dominic stopped. His weapon remained raised, aimed directly at the man's head, and by extension, at Lena. For a long, terrible moment, nobody moved. The only sound was Lena's ragged breathing and the distant crack of gunfire from the house. "You won't shoot her," Dominic said quietly. "She's worth more alive." Maybe I just want to hurt you." The gun pressed harder against Lena's temple. "Kozlov says hello, by the way. Says to tell you this is just the beginning. Tell Kozlov he's a dead man." The Russian laughed. Big words from someone about to watch his leverage die. Lena saw it in Dominic's eyes before it happened. The calculation, the decision, the absolute certainty of what came next. She saw him adjust his aim fractionally to the left. "Close your eyes," he said. She did. The gunshot was deafening. The Russian's grip went slack. Lena felt warm blood spray across her shoulder, her neck, and then she was falling again. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground. Dominic. He pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head while the other still held his weapon, scanning for more threats. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "It's over. I've got you." But it wasn't over. Lena pulled back enough to see his face, saw the blood, too much blood, soaking through his shirt at his side. "You're hit." Flesh wound. His jaw was tight. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." "I'm fine," he repeated, but his hand pressed against his ribs, and when he pulled it away, his palm was red. In the distance, sirens wailed. Helicopter rotors chopped the air. Reinforcements, Lena realized. His people, coming to clean up the mess. She looked at the bodies scattered across the lawn, at the blood on her hands that wasn't hers, at the man who'd just killed 5 people to protect her. "Why didn't you leave me?" she asked quietly. "You could have run, could have let them take me." Dominic's hand touched her face, thumb wiping blood from her cheek. "No," he said simply. "I couldn't." The helicopters landed 20 minutes later, disgorging men in tactical gear who swept the property with military precision. Lena sat on the terrace steps wrapped in a blanket someone had draped over her shoulders, watching them work. They moved around the bodies like they were furniture, documenting, photographing, loading them onto stretchers with the kind of efficiency that suggested this wasn't their first cleanup. A medic had forced Dominic to sit while he patched the gunshot wound, through and through, the man said. Like that made it better. Dominic had refused painkillers, refused anything that might dull his awareness, and submitted to the treatment with gritted teeth and white knuckles. Now he sat beside her on the steps, his shoulder pressed against hers, both of them staring at the ruins of his pristine estate. "I'm sorry," he said finally. Lena laughed, the sound edging toward hysterical. "For which part? The kidnapping? The gunfight? The fact that I killed someone? All of it." His hand found hers, fingers lacing together. "You shouldn't be here, shouldn't have been dragged into this world. But I'm here anyway." She looked at their joined hands, at the blood still crusted under her fingernails. "That man you shot, the one who had me. You could have missed." "I don't miss." "You could have hit me." "I didn't." "But you could have." She turned to face him. "Why? Why risk it? Why not just let them take me?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Do you remember what I told you in the kitchen? About choices? You said you wanted me to choose you." "I lied." His thumb stroked the back of her hand. "The truth is, I chose you the moment I saw you across that ballroom. Everything since, the dance, bringing you here, keeping you when I should have let you go, those weren't strategic decisions. They were selfish ones." "Selfish how?" "Because I wanted something for myself. Something that wasn't part of the empire, the business, the endless cycle of violence and control." He met her eyes. "I wanted something real, someone who looked at me and saw a man, not a monster, even if it was just for a moment." Lena's throat tightened. "I killed someone tonight. To save me. Does that make it better?" "No." Dominic's honesty was brutal. "It makes you like me. Welcome to the darkness, Lena. Population 2. She should have recoiled, should have pulled away and demanded he take her home immediately. Instead, she tightened her grip on his hand. "My father's deadline is up in 6 hours, she said. "I know." "What happens then?" "I don't know anymore." Dominic looked at the sunrise beginning to paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I should make new demands. Up the stakes. Force his hand." He paused. "But I'm tired, Lena. Tired of this game. Tired of being the monster everyone expects me to be." "So stop. It's not that simple. Why not?" She shifted to face him fully. "You run this empire, you make the rules, so change them." "You don't understand how this world works." "Then explain it to me." Dominic studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he stood, pulling her up with him. "Come with me." He led her through the damaged house to his office, a room she hadn't seen before, all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface covered in papers, files, and what looked like surveillance photographs. Dominic gathered several files and spread them across the desk. "This is the Varela organization," he said. "Shipping routes, distribution networks, revenue streams. Legitimate businesses mixed with illegal operations so thoroughly that separating them would take years, maybe decades." Lena looked at the documents. Financial reports listing companies she recognized, construction firms, import-export businesses, restaurants, all fronts, she realized, all hiding something darker beneath the surface. "This is what your father wants to dismantle," Dominic continued, "and he's right to want it, because underneath all this corporate paperwork is a machine that moves drugs, weapons, and people across international borders. A machine that's destroyed lives, funded violence, corrupted officials at every level of government." "So shut it down," Lena said. "And do what? Hand everything over to the Kozlovs, the cartels?" "Nature abhors a vacuum, Lena. You take down one empire, 3 more rise to fill the gap. And they're not usually better." "That's a justification, not a reason." Dominic's jaw tightened. "You're right. It is." He pulled out another file, this one thinner. "This is the Varela Foundation. Legal. Transparent. We fund schools, medical clinics, community centers, in neighborhoods most people have written off. Last year alone, we kept 4,000 kids off the streets. With blood money. Does that matter to the kid who got a scholarship instead of a bullet?" Dominic's voice hardened. "I'm not asking you to approve. I'm asking you to understand. This world isn't black and white, Lena. It's all gray. And the question isn't whether my hands are clean. They're not. They never will be. The question is whether the damage I do is worth the good that comes from it." Lena stared at the files, at the impossible complexity of trying to separate right from wrong when they were woven together so tightly. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to help me find another way." He moved around the desk, stopping in front of her. "I want you to show me how to be the man you saw in that ballroom, the one who wasn't a monster, the one who was worth something more than fear. I can't fix you." "I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm asking you to stay." His hand settled on her shoulders. "Stay and help me build something different, something that doesn't require blood to maintain." "That's insane." "Probably." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "But you're still listening." He was right. She was still listening, still standing here when she should be demanding her freedom, still feeling the ghost of his kiss from the night before, still remembering how he'd thrown himself between her and bullets without hesitation. "If I stay," she said slowly, "it's not as your prisoner, not as leverage, as whatever you want to be." Dominic's hands slid down her arms. "Partner, conscience, the woman who tells me when I'm being an ass. I don't care what you call it, Lena. I just need you to choose it." "In my father's case?" "I'll call him. Tell him you're safe and being released. He can have his investigation, his indictments, his day in court." Dominic's expression hardened. "But I'm done with the old ways. No more retaliation, no more violence. We're going to fight this in courtrooms, not in the streets." "He won't believe you." "Then you'll have to convince him." His forehead nearly touched hers. "Because I meant what I said yesterday. You're the first thing I've wanted that I can't take by force, and I'm choosing to try something I've never done before. I'm choosing to earn you." Lena's hands came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath her palms. "This is crazy. You know that, right? This whole thing is absolutely insane." "I know." His lips brushed her temple. "Tell me to take you home and I will. Right now. No conditions, no demands. You walk away and I'll let you go." "Would you really?" "I don't know." The honesty in his voice cut like glass. "I'd like to think I would, but I've never been tested like this before. Never wanted something this badly." Lena closed her eyes, thinking about the last 48 hours. The terror, the violence, the impossible connection that had grown between them despite every reason it shouldn't. She thought about the man who'd killed to protect her, who'd given her an escape route even while fighting for his life, who looked at her like she was the only real thing in his world. She thought about 43 kids who needed a music program, about communities that needed resources, about an empire that could be turned towards something better if someone was brave enough or crazy enough to try. "I'll stay," she heard herself say, "but on my terms." Dominic pulled back to look at her. Name them. First, you call my father, right now. You tell him I'm safe and choosing to stay, that I'm not a hostage anymore. Done. Second, the foundation. I want complete transparency. Every dollar accounted for. No blood money mixed in with legitimate funding. Agreed. Third, she took a breath. You start the process of legitimizing the business. I don't care if it takes years. I don't care how hard it is. You start or I walk. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay. Just like that? Just like that. His hand cupped her face. Anything else? Yeah. Lena met his eyes. You kiss me again. Right now. So I know this is real and not just shock or fear or some kind of trauma response. The smile he gave her was devastating, real and warm and completely human. I can do that. His mouth found hers, and this time there was no hesitation, no question of whether it was right or wrong. Just heat and need and the terrible knowledge that they'd both crossed into territory they couldn't map. Lena's arms wound around his neck, pulling him closer, and Dominic lifted her onto the desk, scattering papers and files that represented an empire built on darkness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lena rested her forehead against his. This is going to be a disaster, she whispered. Probably. His hand settled at her waist. But it's our disaster. The phone on the desk rang, shrill and insistent. Dominic grabbed it without looking away from her. What? He barked. A pause. Then his expression shifted, hardening into something cold and dangerous. When? Another pause. How many? His jaw clenched. Get everyone to the safe house, lock it down. Nobody in or out until I give the word. He slammed the phone down. What is it? Lena asked, fear creeping back into her voice. The Kozlovs didn't just hit the island. Dominic's eyes were bleak. They hit 3 of my warehouses in Miami, killed 17 people, and they left a message. What message? That this was just the opening move. He pulled her off the desk, his hands gentle despite the violence in his voice. They're coming for everything I have, Lena. Every asset, every business, every person under my protection. And they're not going to stop until one of us is dead. Lena's stomach dropped. Because of me. Because you took me. No. Dominic's hands framed her face, forcing her to look at him. Because I chose to protect you instead of maintaining the balance. Because I showed weakness by caring about something more than power. His thumb brushed her cheek. And I'd do it again. Every single time. People are dying. People were always dying. That's what this world is. His eyes were hard. The question is whether we let them win by becoming monsters ourselves, or whether we find another way. What other way? They're killing your people. Then we stop them. Dominic released her and moved to the window, staring out at the ocean with his hands clenched into fists. But not with more violence, not with retaliation. We do this smart, legal. We use your father's investigation, turn evidence, cooperate with federal prosecutors. We give them the Kozlovs on a silver platter. You're talking about becoming an informant. I'm talking about survival. He turned to face her. And about keeping you safe. Because the moment they figure out you matter to me, really matter, they'll come for you again. And next time I might not be able to stop them. The weight of that reality settled over Lena like a shroud. This wasn't a fairy tale. There was no happy ending where she convinced the criminal to go straight and everything worked out. This was real life, with real consequences, and people were dying because she'd chosen to stay. Maybe I should go, she said quietly. Maybe if they think you don't care about me anymore. They'll kill you to make a point. Dominic crossed back to her in 3 long strides. You don't understand how this works. The moment you became mine, the moment I chose to protect you over maintaining the balance, you became a target. Walking away doesn't change that. It just makes you easier to hit. So what do? We fight. His hand settled on her shoulders. We use every weapon we have, legal, financial, political. We turn this empire into something legitimate before they can tear it down. And we do it together. That's going to take years. I know. People are going to die in the meantime. I know that too. His voice was heavy with the weight of that knowledge. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is surrender, and that means everyone under my protection, every kid in one of our programs, every family depending on our businesses for survival, they all become collateral damage in a war between syndicates. Lena closed her eyes, trying to process the impossible choice in front of her. Stay and help build something better while people died. Leave and watch everything collapse while becoming a target herself. There were no good options, only different shades of terrible. I need to call my father, she said finally. He needs to know what's happening. Dominic handed her the phone. Richard Hayes answered on the second ring, and the relief in his voice when he heard her was almost painful. Lena, thank goodness, are you— I'm fine, Dad. She cut him off. I'm safe, and I'm choosing to stay. Silence. Then, what did you just say? I'm staying with Dominic to help him— She paused, searching for words. To help him do better, to change things. He's gotten to you. Her father's voice shook with fury and fear. Stockholm Syndrome, Lena. That's what this is. You need to— Dad, listen to me. Really listen. Lena took a breath. The Kozlov organization just attacked Dominic's properties. 17 people dead. And they're not stopping. They're going after everyone and everything connected to him, which means they're coming after me whether I leave or not. Then we'll put you in protective custody. For how long? A year? 2? The rest of my life? She looked at Dominic, who watched her with dark, unreadable eyes. Or I stay here, where I'm already protected, and I help turn this empire into something that doesn't require blood to maintain, something you can work with instead of against. You can't possibly believe— I believe he tried to protect me, Lena interrupted, took bullets meant for me, gave me an escape route even while fighting for his life. And I believe he's willing to cooperate with your investigation if it means stopping the Kozlovs and keeping people safe. Another long silence. Then her father's voice, cold and hard. Put him on. Lena handed the phone to Dominic. Mr. Hayes, he said calmly, if you hurt my daughter— Richard's voice was barely controlled rage. I won't. Dominic's eyes never left Lena's face. I give you my word. Your word means nothing to me. Then believe the evidence. Dominic's tone shifted, becoming businesslike. I'm prepared to cooperate fully with your RICO investigation. Financial records, shipping manifests, communications, everything you need to prosecute the Varela organization and its competitors. In exchange, I want immunity for testimony and protection for everyone under my umbrella while we transition to legitimate operations. You're offering to turn informant. I'm offering to help you take down every major crime family on the eastern seaboard, including the Kozlovs, who just declared war on me and killed 17 people to make their point. Dominic paused. Your choice, Mr. Hayes. You can keep trying to build a case against me alone, or you can use me to bring down everyone, including the people who are currently trying to kill your daughter. Lena could hear her father breathing on the other end of the line, calculating, weighing options. Finally, this conversation never happened. You want immunity, you go through official channels, file with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And if I find out you've lied about any of this, you'll have my head on a platter. I know. Dominic's lips quirked. I'll have my attorney contact your office within the hour. He hung up and handed the phone back to Lena. Well, she said, that went better than expected. He's going to investigate every word I said. Probably already has agents digging through my life. Good. Let him find the truth. Lena moved closer. Are you really going to do this? Cooperate? Testify? Yes. No hesitation. Because you asked me to. Because it's the right thing to do. And because I'm tired of being the monster in everyone's story. You'll make enemies. People in your own organization. I already have enemies. At least this way I'm fighting for something that matters. His hand settled at her waist. For someone who matters. Lena leaned into him, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Outside, the sun had fully risen, painting the destroyed gardens in gold and orange. Bodies had been cleared, glass swept, evidence catalogued and removed. And in the wreckage of everything that had been, something new was beginning. Something fragile and dangerous and utterly impossible. But possible enough that Lena stayed. The safe house was a penthouse in downtown Miami, all steel and glass and bulletproof windows 30 floors above the street. Dominic moved Lena there 3 hours after the phone call with her father, surrounded by enough security to invade a small country. She watched the island disappear through the helicopter window and wondered if she'd ever see it again. Probably not. That place was compromised now, tainted by blood and violence. Another casualty of the war Dominic was trying to end. The penthouse was sterile compared to the island estate. Modern furniture in blacks and grays, artwork that looked expensive but impersonal, nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here. It was a fortress, not a home. Lena stood in the living room while Dominic's people swept every room, checking security systems and sight lines with military precision. "How long do we stay here?" she asked. Dominic was on his phone, firing off instructions in rapid Spanish to someone on the other end. He covered the mouthpiece. "Until the Kozlovs make their next move. Could be days, could be weeks. We're just waiting for them to attack again? We're waiting for them to make a mistake." He returned to his call, pacing toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Biscayne Bay. Lena sank onto the leather couch, exhaustion hitting her like a wave. She hadn't slept in over 24 hours. Her clothes still smelled like smoke and blood. Her hands shook when she tried to hold them still. The adrenaline that had carried her through the attack was wearing off, leaving behind the raw reality of what she'd done. She'd killed someone, driven a shard of glass into a man's throat and watched him die. The memory made her stomach heave. She pressed her hands over her face, trying to breathe through the nausea, but all she could see was blood. All she could feel was the hot spray of it across her skin, the terrible resistance of flesh giving way beneath glass. "Lena." She looked up to find Dominic crouched in front of her, his phone abandoned on the coffee table. His hands covered hers, gentle and warm. "It's hitting you now," he said quietly. "The crash. It's normal." "Normal?" She laughed, the sound brittle. "Nothing about this is normal." "No, but the feeling is." His thumbs stroked her knuckles. "The shaking, the nausea, the way you can't stop seeing it. That's your body processing trauma. It'll pass." "How do you know?" "Because I've been where you are." His voice was rough. 12 years old, sitting in my father's office, covered in blood that wasn't mine. He told me it would get easier, that eventually I wouldn't feel anything at all. "Did it? Get easier?" Dominic's eyes were dark. "Yes, and that's the worst part." He released her hands and stood. "Come on. You need to shower and sleep. Everything else can wait." He led her down a hallway to a bedroom that was slightly less sterile than the rest of the penthouse. King bed with white linens, attached bathroom with a shower big enough for 3 people. Lena stood in the doorway while Dominic moved through the space, checking windows and turning on lights. "There are clothes in the closet," he said. "Rosa had them delivered an hour ago. Toiletries in the bathroom. If you need anything else, just ask." Lena nodded mutely. Dominic paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry you had to do that. Kill that man. You shouldn't have been put in that position." "But I was, because of you." "Yes." No argument, no deflection. "Because of me." He left her alone. Lena showered until the water ran cold, scrubbing her skin raw, trying to wash away the memory of blood. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a plush bathrobe, she found fresh clothes laid out on the bed, soft cotton pants and a loose shirt, comfortable and deliberately unsexy. She dressed mechanically and crawled under the covers, certain she wouldn't be able to sleep. She was unconscious within minutes. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through gaps in the blackout curtains and the smell of coffee drifted from somewhere in the penthouse. Lena checked her phone. Rosa had included that in the delivery too, fully charged. It was past noon. She'd slept for nearly 12 hours. There were 43 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize and 1 text from her father. "We need to talk, today. I'll come to you." Lena stared at the message, her stomach knotting. She typed back a response. "Okay. Give me an hour." She found Dominic in the kitchen, bent over a laptop with a cup of coffee gone cold at his elbow. He'd showered and changed too, trading yesterday's blood-stained clothes for dark jeans and a gray Henley that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. The bandage on his ribs showed white beneath the fabric. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression softened. "You slept." "Apparently." Lena poured herself coffee. grateful for something to do with her hands. My father's coming, today. I know, he called an hour ago. Demanded to see you in person before he'd even consider my offer. Dominic closed the laptop. Are you ready for that? Does it matter if I'm not? Yes. He stood and crossed to her, stopping just outside her personal space. If you're not ready, I'll tell him to wait. You set the timeline here, Lena. Not him, not me. The word settled something anxious in her chest. I want to see him. I need him to understand this is my choice. Then he'll be here at 2. Dominic's hand touched her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. But I should warn you, he's not coming alone. Lena's stomach dropped. Who's he bringing? Federal agents, your father's supervisor from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Probably someone from witness protection, given what I'm offering. His lips quirked. They're treating this like a major operation, which, to be fair, it is. Are you scared? Terrified. The admission was startlingly honest. I've spent my entire life on one side of the law. Crossing over now, even with immunity. There are no guarantees, and there are people in my organization who will see this as betrayal. Will they come after you? Probably. Dominic's hand dropped from her face, which is why I need to move fast. Get everything documented and turned over to federal custody before anyone realizes what I'm doing. After that, he shrugged. We'll see who's still standing. The casual way he discussed his own potential murder made Lena's chest tight. This is because of me. If I hadn't, don't. His voice was sharp. Don't take that on. I made this choice, Lena. You gave me a reason to make it, but the choice was mine. Understand? She nodded, not trusting her voice. They spent the next 2 hours preparing. Dominic had files ready, 3 banker's boxes full of documentation that represented years of criminal activity, financial records, shipping manifests, communications with other organizations. Everything her father would need to build cases against not just the Varela organization, but the Kozlovs, the cartels, and half a dozen other syndicates operating on the eastern seaboard. This is enough to put away hundreds of people, Lena said, flipping through one of the files. Including you. That's the point. Dominic stacked the boxes by the door. I give them everything, hold nothing back, show them I'm serious about cooperation. And if they decide immunity isn't enough, if they prosecute anyway, then I go to prison. He said it like he was discussing the weather. But you'll be safe. That's what matters. Lena stared at him, this man who'd kidnapped her less than a week ago, who'd killed 5 people to protect her, who was now willing to sacrifice his freedom to keep her alive. The contradiction was dizzying. I don't understand you, she whispered. I don't understand me either. Dominic moved closer, hands settling at her waist. A week ago, I was perfectly clear on who I was and what I wanted. Then you looked at me across a ballroom like I was worth something more than fear, and suddenly nothing makes sense anymore. Is that a bad thing? I don't know yet. His forehead touched hers. Ask me again when we see if we survive this. The buzzer sounded at exactly 2 o'clock. Dominic's security team went into high alert, weapons drawn, checking the building's cameras with paranoid intensity. When they confirmed it was federal agents and not a Kozlov hit squad, they allowed Richard Hayes and his entourage into the elevator. Lena stood by the windows, arms crossed over her chest, watching the elevator numbers climb. 30 floors felt simultaneously too long and not long enough to prepare for this conversation. The doors opened. Her father stepped out first, flanked by 2 federal agents in dark suits and a woman in her 50s carrying a briefcase. Behind them came 2 more agents, hands resting on their weapons, scanning the penthouse like they expected an ambush. Richard Hayes looked older than Lena remembered, grayer at the temples, new lines carved deep around his mouth and eyes. But his expression when he saw her was pure relief. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into a crushing hug. Thank heaven, he breathed into her hair. When I got the call about the attack on the island, I'm fine, Dad. Lena hugged him back, feeling tears prick her eyes. I'm okay. He pulled back, hands on her shoulders, searching her face. Did he hurt you? At all? No. The truth, Lena. That is the truth. She glanced past him to where Dominic stood near the kitchen, giving them space but watching with hawk-like intensity. He protected me. Took a bullet protecting me. Richard's jaw tightened. He turned to face Dominic, and the temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Mr. Varela. Mr. Hayes. Dominic's voice was carefully neutral. Thank you for coming. I didn't come for you. I came for my daughter. Richard's hand dropped to Lena's shoulder, possessive and protective. And to tell you that if any of this is a trick, if you've hurt her or manipulated her in any way, immunity deal or not, I will make sure you rot in a federal prison for the rest of your natural life. Understood. Dominic didn't flinch. And for the record, if I'd hurt her, you wouldn't be here having this conversation. You'd be identifying my body. The woman with the briefcase cleared her throat. Perhaps we could all sit down and discuss this like professionals? She introduced herself as Assistant U.S. Attorney Catherine Mills, Richard's supervisor. The next hour was a masterclass in legal negotiation as she and Dominic worked through the terms of his cooperation. Full immunity in exchange for testimony. Witness protection for key personnel. A timeline for transitioning legitimate businesses away from criminal control. Lena listened to them dissect her life like it was evidence in a case file. Her kidnapping, the attack on the island, the 17 people killed in the warehouse raids. Every detail cataloged and analyzed for prosecutorial value. I want to be clear about something, Catherine said, flipping through the files Dominic had provided. This cooperation agreement doesn't make you a good person, Mr. Varela. It makes you a useful one. You've built an empire on blood, and the fact that you're willing to dismantle it now doesn't erase the damage you've done. I never claimed otherwise. Dominic's voice was even. But the damage I've done is in the past. What matters now is stopping the damage that's still happening. The Kozlovs killed 17 people 3 days ago. How many more before you finish building your case the traditional way? Catherine's expression hardened. Don't pretend this is altruism. You're saving your own skin. I'm making a trade. My testimony for immunity. That's how this works. Dominic leaned forward. But let's not pretend you wouldn't make the same deal if positions were reversed. You want the Kozlovs, the cartels, the distribution networks that move product through 6 countries? I can give you all of it, today. Or you can spend the next 5 years trying to build cases that fall apart because your key witnesses keep disappearing. The silence that followed was heavy. Richard broke it. I want to speak with my daughter, alone. Catherine nodded. We'll step outside. The federal agents and attorneys filed out, leaving Lena alone with her father. The moment the door closed, Richard's carefully controlled expression crumbled. Lena, sweetheart, you don't have to do this. He grabbed her hands. Whatever he's told you, whatever he's made you believe, you can walk away right now. We'll put you in protective custody, keep you safe. For how long? Lena pulled her hands back gently. A year? 5? The rest of my life hiding from people who want to hurt me to get to him? Then we'll take them all down, every one of them. With what? Cases that take years to build while more people die? She shook her head. Dad, I know this is hard to understand. I barely understand it myself. But Dominic is offering you everything you need to end this. Not just his organization, all of them. That's got to be worth something. Not if it costs me my daughter. Richard's voice cracked. You're all I have left, Lena. Your mother... He stopped, swallowed hard. I can't lose you too. The mention of her mother, dead 5 years from cancer, hit Lena like a physical blow. You're not losing me. I'm choosing this. You're choosing him. I'm choosing to stay and help fix what's broken. There's a difference. Is there? Her father's eyes searched hers. Because from where I'm standing, you're in love with your kidnapper, and that's textbook Stockholm Syndrome. The words hung in the air between them. Lena opened her mouth to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, that what she felt for Dominic was complicated but definitely not love. But the denial stuck in her throat. Because maybe it was love. Or the beginning of it, anyway. The terrifying, impossible beginning of falling for someone who'd seen the worst parts of himself and was trying, however imperfectly, to be better. Maybe it is, she said quietly, or maybe it's something else. Something that doesn't have a clinical term. But it's my choice, Dad. Mine. And I need you to respect that. Richard closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. I can't protect you if you stay with him. I don't need you to protect me. I need you to trust me. Lena took his hand. Please, trust that I know what I'm doing. Do you? No. She smiled despite the tears threatening to spill. But I'm doing it anyway. Her father was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her into another hug, this one gentler. If he hurts you, he won't. If he does, Richard continued like she hadn't spoken, there is nowhere on this earth he can hide from me. Immunity or not, cooperation or not. I will end him, do you understand? I understand. Lena hugged him tighter. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. He kissed the top of her head. More than you know. When they separated, Richard wiped his eyes roughly and straightened his shoulders, slipping back into prosecutor mode. He opened the door and gestured for the others to return. The next 2 hours were a blur of paperwork and logistics. Dominic signed documents that essentially handed over his entire criminal enterprise to federal prosecutors. Catherine outlined the timeline. Depositions starting immediately, grand jury testimony within the month, trials potentially stretching over the next 2 years. We'll need you in protective custody, she told Dominic. You, Miss Hayes, and anyone else in your organization who might be targeted for retaliation. Not an option. Dominic's voice was flat. I have businesses to run, people to protect. Hiding sends the message that I'm weak. Staying visible sends the message that you're a target. Catherine's expression was hard. The Kozlovs aren't going to stop just because you're cooperating with us. If anything, it makes you a bigger threat. Then they'll have to go through my security to get to me. Dominic gestured toward the door, where his men stood in silent formation. I'm not spending the next 2 years in a safe house waiting for this to be over. Mr. Varela, this isn't negotiable. He cut her off. You want my testimony? You get it on my terms. I stay visible. I keep running my businesses, and I protect the people who depend on me. Richard leaned forward. And my daughter? Where does she fit in this plan? All eyes turned to Lena. She felt the weight of their stares, her father's concern, Catherine's skepticism, the federal agent's professional detachment. But it was Dominic's gaze she met, dark and intense and waiting. I stay with him, she said clearly. Not in protective custody, not in hiding, with him. Lena, her father started. This is my choice, Dad. She kept her eyes on Dominic. And I'm making it. The muscle in Richard's jaw jumped, but after a long moment, he nodded. Then I want daily check-ins, video calls so I can see you're safe. And if anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. Agreed. Catherine gathered her papers, clearly unhappy but pragmatic enough to take the win she was getting. We'll have agents assigned to monitor the situation, purely for your protection, Miss Hayes, but they'll be nearby. Fine. Lena stood, suddenly exhausted. Is there anything else? Just one thing. Catherine fixed Dominic with a hard stare. The moment you signed those documents, you became a federal witness. That means any criminal activity from this point forward voids your immunity. Completely. Do you understand? Perfectly. Dominic's voice was calm. I have no intention of breaking the law. See that you don't. Catherine snapped her briefcase closed. Because if you do, I will personally make sure you spend the rest of your life in a supermax prison, cooperation or not. They left 20 minutes later, taking the boxes of evidence and leaving behind a tension that filled the penthouse like smoke. Lena stood by the windows, watching the federal vehicles pull away from the building, feeling the finality of what had just happened. She'd chosen, publicly, irrevocably. There was no going back now. You okay? Dominic asked from behind her. Lena turned to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Ask me tomorrow. Fair enough. He moved closer but didn't touch her. Your father hates me. Can you blame him? No. Dominic's lips quirked. If I had a daughter and someone did to her what I did to you, I'd have put a bullet in his head and buried him in the Everglades. Romantic. Honest. He finally closed the distance, hands settling at her waist. You didn't have to do that. Choose me in front of him. You could have taken the out. I know. So why didn't you? Lena considered the question. Why had she chosen to stay? Was it really just about helping him transition the business? About protecting the kids and the foundation programs? Or was it something deeper, something she wasn't ready to name yet? Because you make me feel seen, she said finally. Like I matter. Not as a music teacher or someone's daughter or a piece on a chessboard, just me. Dominic's hands tightened on her waist. You do matter, more than you know. Then prove it. She met his eyes. Show me this wasn't just about control or possession or winning. Show me you meant what you said about earning me. For a long moment, Dominic just looked at her. Then he stepped back, releasing her. Come with me, he said. He led her to his office, a smaller room off the main living area, dominated by a desk and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. He pulled a folder from one of the drawers and handed it to her. Lena opened it and froze. Inside were documents establishing a trust, a massive trust, funded with enough money to run Harmony Heights Community Center and a dozen others like it for the next 50 years. Her name was listed as the sole trustee with complete authority over fund distribution. I had my attorneys draw this up 3 days ago, Dominic said quietly, before the attack on the island. Before any of this went sideways, because you were right, the foundation needed to be separate from the criminal enterprises, needed to be something clean that couldn't be touched, no matter what happened to me. Lena stared at the numbers, her hands shaking. This is millions. 47 million, to be exact. Dominic moved behind her, looking over her shoulder at the documents. Enough to fund music programs, after-school care, scholarships, whatever those kids need. And it's yours, completely separate from my organization. Even if everything else burns down, this survives. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Because you asked me to do better. Because those kids matter to you, which means they matter to me. His voice was rough. Because I wanted you to have something that was yours. Not leverage, not a bribe, just a choice. Lena turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. You did this before you knew I'd stay. I did it hoping you would. His thumb caught a tear on her cheek. But even if you'd left, even if you'd walked away and never looked back, I wanted you to have this. Wanted you to know that you changed something, changed me. She kissed him. It wasn't calculated or hesitant or careful. It was desperate and raw and full of everything she couldn't put into words. Dominic made a sound low in his throat and kissed her back, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lena rested her forehead against his. I'm terrified, she whispered. Me too. What if we can't do this? What if the Kozlovs win? What if... Then we go down fighting. Dominic's hands framed her face. Together. That's all I can promise you, Lena. Not safety, not certainty. Just that whatever comes next, we face it together. That's a terrible promise. I know. He smiled despite everything. But it's the only one I can keep. Lena kissed him again, softer this time, trying to memorize the taste of him, the feel of his hands on her skin, the steady beat of his heart against hers. Because Dominic was right. There were no guarantees, so no promises of happy endings. Just this moment, and the choice to stay in it. The secure phone on Dominic's desk buzzed. He pulled away reluctantly and checked the message, his expression darkening as he read. What is it? Lena asked. The Kozlovs just made their next move. Dominic's voice was hard. They hit 3 more locations, burned them to the ground, and they left another message. What message? He turned the phone so she could see the image. It was a photograph of the charity gala where they'd met, the Fontainebleau ballroom, beautiful and glittering and whole. Except someone had spray-painted words across the image in red. Your weakness will destroy you. Touch you. Lena's blood ran cold. They know about me, about us. They've known since the island attack. Dominic set down the phone. But this is different. This is a declaration. They're not just coming for my businesses anymore. They're coming for everything I care about. Which means they're coming for me. Yes, he pulled her close. Which means we need to end this fast before they can make good on that threat. How? Dominic's eyes were hard as stone. By giving them exactly what they want. A war. Except this time we fight it on our terms. With federal prosecutors and RICO charges and every legal weapon we have. He paused. But first, I need to make sure you're somewhere they can't touch you. I'm not leaving you. Lena. No. She grabbed his arms. You said we'd do this together. I'm holding you to that. Even if it gets you killed? Even then, she met his eyes. Because I choose you, Dominic. Not the safe option, not the smart option. You. For a moment, she thought he'd argue. Then his mouth crashed down on hers, the kiss fierce and possessive and full of desperate need. When they broke apart, his eyes were nearly black. Then we do this right, he said roughly. We take down the Kozlovs. We turn this empire into something legitimate. And we survive. He kissed her forehead. But if anything happens to you, it won't. But if it does, he continued, his voice shaking, I need you to know that you were worth it. All of this. The choice to change, the risk, everything. Lena's throat tightened. Don't talk like that. Like you're saying goodbye. I'm not saying goodbye. Dominic pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like he could shield her from the world through sheer force of will. I'm saying I love you. And I need you to know that before everything goes to hell. The words hung in the air between them, terrifying and perfect and absolutely true. Lena pulled back just far enough to see his face. Say it again. I love you. No hesitation, no doubt. I've loved you since you looked at me in that ballroom like I was worth saving, and I'll love you until the day I die. That better not be soon. She kissed him again, pouring everything she felt into it, the fear, the hope, the impossible love that had grown between them in less than a week. Because I love you too, and I'm not done with you yet. Outside the windows, Miami glittered in the fading light. Somewhere in that sprawl of concrete and glass, enemies were gathering, planning, preparing to strike. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms, Lena and Dominic let themselves believe they could win, that love was stronger than violence, that choosing each other was enough. Even if everything they'd built was about to burn. The Kozlovs came for them 3 days later. Not with bullets this time, but with something far more insidious, a coordinated media campaign that painted Dominic as a monster hiding behind federal protection, and Lena as either his victim or his accomplice. The headline screamed across every major outlet. Mafia boss trades testimony for immunity while holding prosecutor's daughter. Federal deal with devil. Varela organization escapes justice kidnapping. Victim or willing participant? Questions surround Lena Hayes. Lena read the articles on her phone while Dominic paced the penthouse like a caged animal, his security chief updating him on the damage. The story had been carefully orchestrated. Anonymous sources, leaked photographs from the island attack, speculation about Stockholm Syndrome that her father's earlier fears had somehow made public. They're painting you as either weak or corrupt, Dominic's lawyer said over speakerphone, and they're painting Miss Hayes as unstable. The U.S. Attorney's Office is getting flooded with calls demanding they revoke your immunity deal. Can they? Lena asked, her stomach churning. Legally? No. The agreement is signed and binding. The lawyer's voice was grim. But politically? This kind of pressure could make them drag their feet on prosecuting the Kozlovs, delay grand jury proceedings, essentially render Dominic's cooperation worthless. Dominic stopped pacing. So the Kozlovs don't need to kill me. They just need to destroy my credibility and wait for the federal case to collapse. Exactly. A pause. I'd recommend going dark. No public appearances, no statements. Let this blow over. That's not an option. Dominic's voice was hard. Going dark makes us look guilty. We need to control the narrative. How? Lena set down her phone. Everything they're saying is technically true. You did kidnap me. I am choosing to stay with you. How do we spin that? Dominic crossed to her, his hands settling on her shoulders. We don't spin it. We own it. Every word. And we tell our story before they can twist it into theirs. You want to go public? I want to stop hiding. His eyes held hers. No more shadows. No more half-truths. We stand together and we tell people exactly what happened, from the ballroom to now. Let them judge the truth instead of the rumors. Lena's heart hammered. That's insane. You know that, right? Probably. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. But I'm tired of letting other people write our story. He was right. Lena knew he was right. But the thought of standing in front of cameras, of exposing everything that had happened between them to public scrutiny, made her stomach turn. Still, the alternative, watching the Kozlovs destroy them with lies and innuendo, was worse. "Okay," she said, "we do it. Together." Dominic called Catherine Mills and Richard Hayes within the hour. Her father's reaction was predictably explosive, shouting about legal exposure and putting Lena in danger and throwing away every tactical advantage they had. Catherine was only marginally calmer, listing a dozen reasons why a public statement was professional suicide. But in the end, they both agreed to one thing. If Dominic and Lena were going to do this, they needed to do it right. The press conference was scheduled for the following afternoon at the Federal Building downtown. Catherine insisted on controlling the venue and the guest list, limiting attendance to verified journalists, and keeping the Kozlov-friendly media outlets at arm's length. Richard demanded final approval over every word they planned to say. Lena spent the night before writing and rewriting her statement, trying to find words that captured the impossible complexity of falling in love with your kidnapper. Every version sounded either crazy or naive, or like she was making excuses for inexcusable behavior. Around midnight, she gave up and found Dominic on the penthouse terrace, staring out at the Miami skyline with a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, sliding into the space beside him. "Too much riding on tomorrow." He offered her the glass. "One mistake, and we give the Kozlovs exactly what they want." Lena took a sip, the whiskey burning warm down her throat. "What if we're making a mistake just by doing this? What if we make everything worse? Then we make it worse together." Dominic's arms settled around her shoulders, pulling her against his side. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how insane this all is." And you're right, it is insane. Everything about this, about us, defies logic. His hand tightened on her shoulder. "But the thing about logic is it doesn't account for the moment you see someone across a crowded room and know, instantly and completely, that your life just changed. Logic can't explain why I walked toward you instead of away, why I kept you on that island longer than I needed to, why I'm willing to burn down everything I've built just to keep you safe." Lena looked up at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes that he showed no one else. "You're saying you believe in fate?" "I'm saying I believe in you." He set down the whiskey and turned to face her fully. "And I believe that whatever happens tomorrow, whatever the world thinks about us, we're worth fighting for." She kissed him then, standing on her toes to reach his mouth, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact. Dominic's arms came around her, holding her like she was something precious, something worth protecting against the entire world. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lena rested her forehead against his chest. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "So am I." His hand stroked her hair. "But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms while Miami glittered below them, both trying not to think about how badly tomorrow could go. The Federal Building was a fortress of concrete and glass, surrounded by barriers and armed security that had tripled since news of the press conference broke. Lena sat in a holding room with her father while Dominic met with Catherine and the other federal attorneys, going over final logistics. "You don't have to do this," Richard said for the 10th time. "Even now, you can walk away. Say you were coerced. I'll back you up." "I know." Lena smoothed down her dress. Simple navy blue, professional, without being severe. "But I'm not going to." "Why?" Her father's voice cracked. "Help me understand, sweetheart. Why are you willing to destroy your reputation, maybe your whole future, for a man who kidnapped you?" Lena considered the question. Why was she doing this? For Dominic, for herself, for some naive belief that love could overcome the circumstances of how it started? "Because he chose me," she said, finally. "Not just at the ballroom, not just on the island. He chose me over his empire, over his safety, over everything he'd spent his life building, and nobody's ever done that before." She met her father's eyes. "You've spent my whole life teaching me to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when everyone thinks you're wrong. That's what I'm doing now." "This is different." "Is it?" Lena challenged. "You've built cases that everyone said were impossible. Prosecuted people everyone said were untouchable. All because you believed the law was worth fighting for, even when the odds were terrible." She paused. I'm fighting for something too, Dad. I'm fighting for the chance to help someone become better than what the world made them. Is that really so different from what you do? Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her into a hug, tight and desperate. I just don't want to lose you. You won't. Lena hugged him back. I promise. A knock on the door interrupted them. Catherine appeared, all business in a charcoal suit. We're ready. 5 minutes. The press room was packed, journalists crammed shoulder to shoulder, cameras positioned at every angle, the air thick with anticipation and barely concealed hostility. Lena felt their eyes on her the moment she walked in, felt their judgment like a physical weight. Dominic was already seated at the long table at the front of the room, flanked by his attorneys. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression softened. Lena took the seat beside him, their hands finding each other beneath the table. Catherine stepped to the microphone. Thank you all for coming. I'll make a brief statement, then Mr. Varela and Miss Hayes will answer questions. Please remember that this is an ongoing federal investigation, so some topics will be off limits. She outlined the basics: Dominic's cooperation agreement, the scope of his testimony, the expectation that his information would lead to multiple prosecutions. Then she stepped aside, and Dominic moved to the microphone. He looked out at the sea of journalists, his expression calm despite the storm of flash photography. My name is Dominic Varela, he began. For most of my life, I've been exactly what you think I am, a criminal. A man who built an empire on violence and fear and the exploitation of vulnerable people. I won't stand here and make excuses for that. I won't claim I was forced into this life or that I didn't have choices. I made choices, bad ones, and people suffered because of them. The room was absolutely silent. 6 days ago, I made another choice. I met a woman at a charity gala, a music teacher trying to save a community program, and I did something unforgivable. I took her, used her as leverage against her father, who was prosecuting my organization. I kept her on a private island against her will. I committed a federal crime, and I won't pretend otherwise. Lena's hand tightened on his beneath the table. But something happened during those days. Something I didn't expect. That woman looked at me, really looked at me, and saw something worth saving. She asked me to be better, to do better, and for the first time in my life, I wanted to try. He paused. That's why I'm here. Not because I'm afraid of prison, not because I want to save myself, but because Lena Hayes showed me that change is possible, that even someone like me can choose a different path. He stepped back from the microphone and took Lena's hand, pulling her to her feet. Now I'd like Lena to speak for herself, because despite what some of you have written, she's not a victim who needs to be saved. She's a woman making her own choices, and those choices deserve to be heard. Lena's heart hammered as she stepped to the microphone. Every camera in the room swung toward her. Every journalist leaned forward, hungry for her story. My name is Lena Hayes, she began, her voice shaking slightly. And everything Dominic just said is true. He kidnapped me, held me against my will, put me in danger. Those are facts, and I won't minimize them. She took a breath, steadying herself. But here's what's also true. When armed men attacked the island where I was being held, Dominic didn't use me as a human shield. He didn't trade my life for his. He fought for me, took a bullet protecting me, gave me a way to escape even though it meant he might die. Her voice grew stronger. And when it was over, when he could have continued using me as leverage, he chose differently. He chose to cooperate with federal prosecutors. He chose to dismantle his own empire. He chose me over everything he'd spent his life building. The room erupted in questions, journalists shouting over each other. Are you saying you love him? Do you have Stockholm Syndrome? What does your father think about this relationship? Catherine moved to the microphone. One at a time, please. A woman from the Miami Herald stood. Miss Hayes, how can you expect people to believe this is a genuine relationship when it started with a crime? Lena met her eyes. I don't expect you to believe anything. I'm just telling you what happened. What's still happening? Dominic and I found something real in impossible circumstances. Maybe that makes us crazy. Maybe it makes us naive. But it's the truth. A reporter from CNN spoke up. Mr. Varela, critics say your cooperation agreement is just a way to escape justice for decades of criminal activity. What do you say to that? Dominic leaned toward the microphone. They're right. In a perfect world, I'd be prosecuted for every crime I've committed. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in one where the Kozlov organization just killed 17 people and will kill more unless they're stopped. My testimony can stop them. It can stop the cartels, the trafficking networks, the violence that destroys communities. So yes, I'm trading my testimony for immunity, but I'm also helping to take down organizations that are worse than mine ever was. Another journalist stood. Worse how? Your organization has been linked to dozens of deaths, and the Kozlovs have been linked to hundreds. Thousands if you count the people who've died from the drugs they distribute. Dominic's voice was hard. I'm not claiming to be a saint, but I am claiming to be useful, and right now that matters more than whether I'm punished for my past crimes. The questions continued for another 30 minutes, some hostile, some genuinely curious, all dissecting every aspect of their story. Lena answered honestly, even when the questions made her uncomfortable, even when journalists asked point blank if she'd been coerced, manipulated, or threatened into supporting Dominic. Finally, Catherine called time. That's all for today. Thank you. They left through a side entrance surrounded by federal agents and Dominic's security. The moment they were in the armored SUV, Lena collapsed against the seat, adrenaline draining from her body. That was brutal, she breathed. You were perfect. Dominic's hand found hers. Strong, honest, everything I knew you'd be. They still think I'm crazy. Probably. He pulled her close. But at least now they've heard your side. That's all we can control. Richard was waiting at the penthouse when they returned, his expression unreadable. He waited until Dominic's security had swept the premises and given them privacy before speaking. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most foolish, he said finally. I haven't decided which. Maybe both, Lena offered. Her father's lips twitched, almost a smile. The U.S. Attorney's Office is already getting different calls, some still demanding they revoke the immunity deal. But others, he paused, others saying they're glad someone's finally taking down the Kozlovs, that maybe cooperation is worth it if it saves lives. Public opinion is shifting? Dominic sounded surprised. Slightly. Don't get cocky. Richard fixed him with a hard stare. You're still a criminal who kidnapped my daughter. Immunity doesn't change that. But... He took a breath. But I watched you up there today. Watched you take responsibility without making excuses. And I watched my daughter defend you with the same passion she defends those kids in her music program. So maybe, there's something here worth not destroying. The admission clearly cost him. Lena crossed to her father and hugged him tight. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. Richard pulled back. Because if he hurts you, immunity or not, cooperation or not, I will make his life a living hell. Clear? Crystal, Dominic said from behind her. Over the next 2 weeks, the narrative began to shift. Not completely. There were still plenty of outlets calling Lena a victim and Dominic a manipulator. But other voices emerged. Domestic violence advocates who acknowledged that love and trauma could coexist. Former prosecutors who pointed out that cooperation agreements had always been imperfect tools for a greater good. Even a few psychologists who argued that while Stockholm Syndrome was real, so was the human capacity for finding connection in unexpected places. More importantly, the federal case against the Kozlovs gained momentum. Armed with Dominic's testimony and documentation, prosecutors brought RICO charges against 23 members of the organization. Half of them were arrested within days. The others went into hiding, their operations disrupted, and their leadership in chaos. The retaliation Lena had feared never came, not because the Kozlovs weren't dangerous, but because they were too busy trying to survive the federal onslaught to mount an effective counterattack. And by the time they regrouped, it was too late. The damage had been done. Dominic spent those weeks in depositions and meetings with federal prosecutors, systematically dismantling not just the Kozlov empire, but a dozen other criminal organizations that had operated with impunity for decades. It was exhausting, dangerous work that left him drained and haunted. But he kept going. Because Lena asked him to. Because he'd promised. Because somewhere along the way, being better than what the world expected had become more important than protecting the empire he'd built. Lena threw herself into the foundation work, using the trust Dominic had established to expand programs across Miami. She hired staff, partnered with schools, created opportunities for hundreds of kids who'd been written off by everyone else. It was hard, often frustrating work that reminded her daily why she'd walked into that ballroom 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. It felt like a lifetime. One evening, Dominic returned to the penthouse to find Lena on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Long day?" she asked. 3 depositions, 4 hours of testimony, and a very angry defense attorney who accused me of lying to save myself. His voice was rough. "So yeah, long day." Lena turned in his arms to face him. "Are you okay?" "Don't know." He was quiet for a moment. "Every person I testify against is someone I worked with, someone I trusted. Some of them were friends. And I'm ending their lives to save mine." "You're ending their freedom to stop them from hurting more people," Lena corrected gently. "There's a difference." "Is there?" His eyes were dark. "Because from where I'm standing, it all feels like betrayal." "Maybe it is." She touched his face. "But it's also justice. And sometimes those things overlap." Dominic pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I don't know how to do this. How to be this person. The same way I do." Lena's arms tightened around him. "One day at a time. One choice at a time. And you don't do it alone." They stood like that while the sun dipped below the horizon, both holding on to each other against the weight of everything they'd been through and everything still to come. 3 months after the press conference, the final pieces fell into place. The Kozlov leadership was convicted on federal RICO charges: conspiracy, money laundering, murder for hire. The sentences ranged from 25 years to life. Their organization, once one of the most powerful on the eastern seaboard, was effectively destroyed. The cartels and trafficking networks Dominic had exposed suffered similar fates. Federal prosecutors, armed with his testimony and documentation, secured convictions that dismantled operations spanning 6 countries. The cost was high. 3 witnesses died under suspicious circumstances. 2 federal agents were injured in a retaliatory bombing, and Dominic received daily death threats from people who viewed his cooperation as the ultimate betrayal. But the Varela organization's transition to legitimacy continued. Dominic sold off the criminal enterprises, turned over shipping routes to federal oversight, and poured resources into the businesses that had always been legal. It was a slow, painful process that would take years to complete, but it was happening. Lena stood in the newly renovated Harmony Heights Community Center, watching 43 kids file into the music room for their first rehearsal in the expanded space. New instruments, new equipment, a waiting list that had grown to over 200. Marcus was there, now teaching younger kids the saxophone techniques he'd learned. Destiny was preparing for a scholarship audition at Juilliard. Every face represented a life that had changed because someone had given them a chance. Because Lena had walked into a ballroom and caught the attention of a man who'd been looking for something real. "They sound good," Dominic said from the doorway. Lena turned to find him watching the rehearsal with an expression she'd learned to recognize: pride mixed with regret. Pride in what they'd built, regret for the years he'd wasted building something else. "They're getting better every day." She moved to stand beside him. "How was the meeting?" "Productive. The last of the criminal holdings transferred to federal custody this morning. As of today, the Varela organization is officially legitimate." He paused. "Well, mostly legitimate. Still some gray areas that'll take time to sort out. But you're trying." "I'm trying." His hand found hers. "Because of you." "Not just because of me," Lena corrected. "Because you chose to. I just gave you a reason." They watched the kids rehearse for a while longer, the music filling the space with something hopeful and bright. Then Dominic pulled her toward the exit. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere I should have taken you weeks ago." He drove them north along the coast, past the glittering hotels and crowded beaches, until they reached a quieter stretch of shoreline. The sun was setting as they walked across the sand, shoes in hand, the ocean breeze cool against their skin. "This is where I came after my mother died," Dominic said quietly. "When I needed to think, to remember what it felt like before everything got dark." Lena squeezed his hand. "How old were you?" 16. Cancer, same as your mother." His voice was rough. "She made me promise I'd find something worth fighting for, something besides power and control. I spent 20 years breaking that promise. And now?" He stopped walking and turned to face her, the sunset painting him in gold and shadow. Now I've found it. Found you, and I'm not letting go. Dominic reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Lena's breath caught. I know this is fast, he said, opening the box to reveal a simple platinum band with a single diamond. I know we've only known each other for 3 months. I know most people would say we're crazy for even considering this. He paused. But I also know that from the moment I saw you across that ballroom, my life divided into before and after. Before, I was a man who took what he wanted without asking. After, I became someone who learned to ask, to earn, to deserve. Tears streamed down Lena's face. You don't have to answer now, Dominic continued. You don't have to answer ever if you're not ready. But I needed you to know that this, us, it's not just about surviving what we've been through. It's about building something new, something real, something worth all the impossible choices we've made. He got down on one knee in the sand. Lena Hayes, will you marry me? The question hung in the air between them, carried on the ocean breeze. Lena looked at the man kneeling before her, this impossible, complicated, broken man who'd chosen to become better because she'd asked him to. This man who'd protected her, fought for her, loved her with a ferocity that still took her breath away. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, I'll marry you. Dominic slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like salt and tears and the promise of tomorrow. Lena wrapped her arms around his neck, holding him tight, feeling the steady beat of his heart against hers. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, the sun had set completely. Stars were beginning to appear overhead, tiny points of light in the gathering darkness. We're going to have to tell my father, Lena said. Dominic groaned. He's going to kill me. Probably. She kissed him again. But I'll protect you. My hero. His arms tightened around her. What did I ever do to deserve you? You chose me. Lena rested her head against his chest. You chose me when you could have chosen power, when you could have chosen safety, when you could have chosen anything else. That's what you did to deserve me. They stood on the beach as night fell around them, wrapped in each other's arms, both knowing the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more trials, more threats, more people who judged them for how their story began instead of what it had become. But they'd survived the impossible. They'd turned a kidnapping into a partnership, violence into protection, an empire of darkness into something that served the light. And if they could do that, they could survive anything. 2 years later, Lena stood in a different ballroom. Not the Fontainebleau this time, but a smaller venue in Coral Gables decorated simply with white flowers and candlelight. Her wedding dress was elegant but understated, chosen more for comfort than spectacle. Her father walked her down the aisle, his hand steady on her arm despite the tears in his eyes. He'd come around over the months, slowly accepting that his daughter had found something real with someone impossible. It hadn't been easy. There were still moments of tension, still arguments about Dominic's past and the choices he'd made. But Richard Hayes had also watched Dominic testify at trial after trial, taking down organizations that had operated with impunity for decades, had watched him pour resources into community programs and legitimate businesses, had watched the way he looked at Lena, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. And slowly, grudgingly, he'd accepted that maybe redemption was possible, even for monsters. Dominic waited at the altar in a simple black suit, his best man, a former FBI agent who'd worked the Kozlov case, standing beside him. When Lena reached the front of the aisle, her father placed her hand in Dominic's. Take care of her, Richard said quietly, or I'll make good on every threat I've ever made. Understood, Dominic replied with equal gravity. Then Richard stepped back, and Lena and Dominic faced each other. The ceremony was short, the vows simple. They'd written them together, stripping away all the traditional language about obeying and submitting in favor of something more honest. I promise to choose you, Lena said, her voice steady. Every day, in every way. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I promise to earn you, Dominic replied. Every day, in every way. To be worthy of the choice you made when you could have chosen anything else. They exchanged rings. The engagement band joined by a simple matching wedding ring. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant said. You may kiss your bride. Dominic pulled Lena close and kissed her, gentle and sure, while their small gathering of family and friends applauded. When they broke apart, both smiling, Lena saw her father wipe his eyes. The reception was intimate, just 50 people, mostly staff from the foundation and a few of Dominic's legitimate business partners. No crime bosses, no federal prosecutors who'd prosecuted his former associates, just people who believed in second chances and impossible love stories. Rosa had catered the meal, pouring decades of expertise into every dish. Marcus and Destiny performed a duet that left half the room in tears. Richard gave a toast that started stern and ended warm, acknowledging that while he'd never approve of how they met, he couldn't deny what they'd built together. And when the dancing started, Lena and Dominic took the floor for their first dance. "You know what I was thinking about?" Dominic murmured as they swayed to the music. "What?" "That ballroom, 6 months ago, when I walked across that floor and decided you were worth risking everything for." His hand tightened on her waist. "I had no idea what I was starting, no idea that the woman I was about to kidnap would end up saving me instead." "I didn't save you," Lena corrected. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a reason to try." "Same thing." He spun her out and pulled her back in closer than before. "You're my reason, Lena, for everything. The cooperation, the testimony, building something legitimate. All of it starts and ends with you. That's a lot of pressure. You can handle it." His lips brushed her temple. "You're the strongest person I know." They danced through 3 more songs before the party swept them up, friends demanding toasts, Rosa insisting they eat, photographers capturing every moment. It was beautiful and chaotic and perfect. Around midnight, Lena found herself on a balcony overlooking the water, taking a moment to breathe. The music drifted from inside, mingling with laughter and conversation. She looked at the ring on her finger, still getting used to the weight of it. "Hiding from your own wedding?" her father asked, stepping onto the balcony. "Just taking a moment." Lena smiled. "It's been a long day. It's been a long 6 months." Richard moved to stand beside her. "I need to tell you something." Lena's stomach tightened. "What?" "I've been watching him, Dominic. Watching how he treats you, how he's handling the transition to legitimate business, how he's testified at every trial without asking for special treatment." Her father paused. "And I need to admit that I was wrong about him." "Dad?" "No, let me finish." Richard turned to face her. "I thought he was using you. Thought this whole thing was manipulation or Stockholm Syndrome or some elaborate con. But I was wrong. He loves you, really loves you. The kind of love that makes someone willing to destroy everything they've built for a chance at something real." Tears pricked Lena's eyes. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." "Well, now you have." Well, Richard pulled her into a hug. "I still don't like how this started. Probably never will. But I can't deny the ending. You've built something good together, sweetheart. Something that helps people. And that matters more than how it began." Lena hugged him tight, letting herself cry against his shoulder like she hadn't since her mother died. When they finally pulled apart, she wiped her eyes and laughed. "I'm ruining my makeup." "You're beautiful regardless." Richard kissed her forehead. "Now get back in there and dance with your husband. He's been watching the door like he's afraid you've run away." Lena went back inside to find Dominic exactly where her father said he'd be, standing near the entrance, scanning the crowd with barely concealed worry. His expression cleared the moment he saw her. "Thought you might have changed your mind," he said, pulling her close. "Not a chance." She kissed him. "You're stuck with me now." "Thank goodness." He kissed her back. "Because I have no idea how to do this without you." "Do what?" "Any of it. The business, the foundation, being a better person." His hand cupped her face. "You're my compass, Lena. Without you, I'd be lost." "Good thing you found me then. Best decision I ever made." Dominic's smile was warm and real and completely human, walking across that ballroom instead of walking away. They danced until the early hours of morning, until the guests began to leave and Rosa started cleaning up. Then they drove to the penthouse, their home now, redecorated to reflect both their tastes instead of just Dominic's stark minimalism. In the bedroom, with the city lights glittering outside the windows, Dominic pulled Lena close. "I love you," he murmured against her hair. More than I thought I was capable of loving anything. I love you too. Lena looked up at him. Even though you're the most impossible person I've ever met. Impossible how? Impossible to categorize. Impossible to predict. Impossible not to love despite every reason I should have run the other way. She kissed him. You're my impossible man. And you're my salvation. He kissed her back, deep and slow. The woman who saved a monster from himself. You were never a monster, Lena whispered. Just a man who forgot he had a choice. I just reminded you. They made love slowly, tenderly, taking their time to memorize every touch and kiss and whispered promise. And when they finally fell asleep tangled together, both exhausted and happy, they dreamed of the future they were building. A future where music filled community centers across Miami, where kids who'd been written off discovered talents they never knew they had, where an empire built on blood had been transformed into something that served instead of exploited, where love, impossible, complicated, hard-won love, had proven stronger than violence. 5 years after that night in the ballroom, Lena stood on a stage in front of 500 people, preparing to cut the ribbon on the 10th Harmony Heights location. Dominic stood beside her, his hand resting supportively on the small of her back, their 3-year-old daughter balanced on his hip. The foundation had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. 10 locations, 1,200 students, a waiting list that stretched into the thousands, partnerships with schools, corporations, and government programs that had once seemed impossible, all funded by an empire that had been turned toward the light. Lena looked out at the crowd, students, parents, teachers, community leaders, and thought about how far they'd come, how a single choice in a ballroom had cascaded into this moment, this life, this impossible dream made real. Thank you all for being here, she said into the microphone. 5 years ago, I walked into a charity gala hoping to save one music program. Today, we're opening our 10th location, and none of this would have been possible without the support of this community, the dedication of our staff, and the belief that every child deserves a chance to discover their potential. She paused, looking at Dominic. And without someone who was willing to change, to choose differently, to prove that redemption isn't just possible, it's worth fighting for. Dominic smiled at her, that private smile that was hers alone, and Lena felt her heart swell with love for this man who'd terrified her, protected her, loved her with a ferocity that still took her breath away. She cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in applause. And as students flooded into the new building, their voices rising in excitement and wonder, Lena took Dominic's hand and thought about how their story would sound to outsiders. A kidnapping that became a love story. A criminal who became a partner in justice. An empire of darkness transformed into something that served the light. It sounded impossible. It sounded insane. It sounded exactly like what it was. A story about choice. About the moment someone decides to be better than what the world made them. About love that grows in the spaces between violence and redemption. About two people who should never have worked but somehow did. What are you thinking about? Dominic asked, shifting their daughter to his other hip. Lena looked at her family, her impossible, beautiful family, and smiled. I'm thinking about how you chose me, she said, across a ballroom, across every impossible obstacle, across every reason we shouldn't work. You chose me. Every time, Dominic replied. Every single time. Their daughter reached for Lena, and she took her, holding her close while Dominic's arm came around both of them. They stood like that, watching the students explore their new space, watching dreams take shape in real time. And Lena knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, whatever challenges or obstacles or impossible situations they faced, they would face them together. Because that's what they did. That's what they'd always done. From the moment Dominic Varela walked across a ballroom and said 4 words that changed everything. You're leaving with me. And Lena Hayes, for reasons she'd spent years trying to understand, had said yes. The best decision she'd ever made. The impossible choice that had saved them both.